come back to one other thing is, you're talking about outcomes. What are the desired outcomes? That fundamentally ties into overall business strategy, how effectively that's communicated, how line managers understand their own responsibility as a part of that overall strategy. And I think if you look within the kind of annuity services that recruitment companies can progress to, that can evolve to that can take on to broaden the partnership that they have with an end customer, there are various ways that they can help with those outcomes. You mentioned RPO, you mentioned MSP, a more joined up approach to managing this permanent and flexible workforce. From our point of view, obviously with a focus on services procurement, the output-based statement of work, we're also seeing that those annuity services expand into the provision of truly outcome-based project and consulting services that recruitment companies are able to provide, that are of huge benefit to customers, where you've got this kind of merging of the management consulting world and the staffing world, where you've got management consulting firms starting to act a lot like recruitment companies in some ways to fulfill the work they're doing, particularly obviously very relevant to what the professional services areas you guys are looking at, and also staffing businesses starting to act more like management consultancies and move up the value chain in that way. How do you guys think, and I'll put this one to Tim first, how do you guys think this has been and is likely to be affected by IR35?
Well, can I just sort of make a comment on what you said before about management consulting businesses? Large management consulting businesses, I've not come across a single one of the big six that doesn't have a rate card for any of their consultants.
Yeah.
So I'd say they're more like recruitment businesses than we give them credit for. I think the impact of IR35 has definitely been to provide that lens on, hang on a second, who have we got who's not on our payroll in our business, which many organisations didn't have a clear view on 3 or 4 years ago. I think that there's been a reaction which has probably been twofold in where we're seeing it at the moment, where we are today. I think you've got certainly the FTSE 250 organisations, being very compliant in the way that they adhere to the legislation, and have essentially got outsourced permanent workers doing non-permanent work. So they're compensating them and compensating them in that way. So they've essentially just paid the extra tax. I think there's other organisations that, as part of that, are probably willing to accept a bit more risk around what work is inside or outside of R35. But I think within that, there have been organisations, as part of that process of looking at what their non-permanent workers are actually doing, what the value and output they're actually providing, we've come to the conclusion that actually there's a better way of doing this. There's a more correct way in which we can use that resource to get better value and better outcomes from what they're doing, by considering more closely how we manage what their outputs are, rather than manage the heads. And this is, we've worked with, there's 3 customers particularly that come to mind who we have worked with to help them build projects through recruitment businesses, to help them build projects or statements of work, services and solutions. Giles and I have also done this years ago, before IR35, actually, because it was actually the best solution for the organisation. There was an obvious way in which they could secure the talent. That was interestingly driven by the customer having a concern that they weren't going to have access to some very specific skills in a very business critical business critical function, and they wanted a way of ensuring that they had a risk-free way of having continual access to those skills, but in a way that they could call on them in a way that fitted with their demand much more than having them sitting on the bench doing nothing sometimes. So so when those organizations that have looked at that, they may have come to that solution as a result of the prompt of IR35. They may come to that conclusion, and I think it's probably fair to say most organizations have come to that conclusion because they've had to inspect how they use non-permanent labor or off payroll labor. But then there are clear circumstances where the best way of utilizing that talent is to concentrate on what their outcome is to manage them by the outcome, manage that talent pool by the outcome that you want, rather than the time or head that you want sitting on a seat somewhere in an office. I'm speculating here, but I think possibly people are much more comfortable now because of the pandemic about, not being so presenteeism is not such a big thing as it was, and people are much more used to thinking about outcomes of what people are doing. But there are challenges for a traditional transactional recruiter being able to run those services. There are fundamentally different things that they need to acquire the expertise in.
Oh, for sure.
To be able to make those things work. And I think from a customer's perspective, from an end user's perspective as well, that there's also a journey that they need to go on to be really clear about that being the right solution for the particular circumstance.
It takes investment on both sides.
Yeah, definitely.
Completely.
But as I say, we can reel off a number of organisations where that is happening and it has worked. And some of them it needs maturing. Some of them has been a bit bumpy along the way. There's other organisations that we've touched as well that are finding it quite challenging to do. Other recruiters that are finding it quite challenging to do because there's some challenges around it. But it's no doubt, if it's positioned with the customer, the end users in the right way, and then the circumstances are right, that it is just a better way of doing it. It fits more with the need of the business.
I think what we've seen is where there isn't a clarity on what kind of problem and task it's looking to solve and achieve, what kind of solution, service and outcome is it looking to provide and support. And I think the delving into the detail of some of the customer engagements will be, well, we're not quite sure we're doing what we originally said we were going to do, and the customer's not quite sure they've actually got what they thought they'd bought in the first place. And I think a lot of it's still got to be, comes back to, as Tim says, very much a clear determination of what outcome is looking to be achieved. And then, the gap for the organisation providing is this, well, how do we acquire some of that capability to become more service and outcome based, which, by its nature is something that is an ongoing rather than just a, reward, rather than just the gratification of a single transaction, a single placement or a single hire. But the disciplines of delivering these things are very much around partnering, coming back to what we've been saying around partnering with an organization to help them achieve some longer term goals, to get embedded delivering these kind of statement of work solutions, start to get you a seat at the table where you can help influence the wider talent challenge, and upselling these kinds of services into different kind of talent acquisition models becomes far easier. And